Welcome, everybody, to the Neuromasters Show, where we uncover the transformative powers of the mind. I'm Reg Malhotra, your host, and I'm here to guide you with practical tools and inspiring stories grounded in neurolinguistic programming and hypnosis. Now, whether you're a high achiever feeling stuck or a growth seeker looking to overcome setbacks, join us each week to break through barriers and achieve profound personal and professional growth. So let's dive in and unlock your potential.
Welcome back to the Neuromasters podcast. I'm your host, Jim, and today we are diving into another powerful topic: how unresolved family trauma and generational patterns shape our lives, and often in ways that we are unaware of. So here to guide us in breaking these cycles is Reg Malhotra, the founder of Neuromasters Academy. And Reg, we are excited to get started on today's episode with you.
Great topic. Excited to be here, Jim.
So, family trauma and generational patterns, these are terms that we hear a lot, but many people don't fully understand what they mean. Can you maybe start by talking a little bit about these concepts, what they entail, and how they begin to manifest in our lives?
Sure. Yes, family trauma. Look, we'll need to unpack it and really break it down and make it very, very simple. Because sometimes these words sound like these big things, but when it comes down to it, it's referring to what we've been exposed to, what our mind has been exposed to, what our mind has accepted as a possibility in the first place. You see, we human beings have this predisposition to emulate, to repeat, to do what the mind has been exposed to enough times. So things happen in people's families. I mean, families are meant to be about love, about togetherness, about the clan, the group, right? About safety, about protection, about caring, about growth. But let's get real. For a lot of people, family turns out to be the source of some of their major problems. Like I work with thousands of people, and a lot of the problems go back to what happened in childhood, what happened with the parents. The amount of people that have experienced abuse, mental, physical, emotional, and even sexual, inside of a family structure. Remember, these are people that one is meant to feel safe in, one is meant to be able to trust. It's no different to the fact that 1 in 3 women have experienced some form of sexual, assault or abuse. 1 in 3, this is a staggering number, have experienced some form of sexual abuse at the hands of someone they knew very closely. Not always family. I'm just bringing that point in here. Someone they were meant to be able to trust, whether it's at the workplace, whether it's so that's telling us something that sure, family is meant to be a certain way. However, things happen inside families. I mean, you only got to look at Christmas Day. I mean, some of the apparently the level of disputes and arguments and violence that occurs on Christmas Day is off the charts, right? And so, what is family trauma? It's really meant to suggest that unless we are awake enough, unless we are conscious enough, unless we decide how we want our life to turn out and we protect ourselves, put a guard around what we don't want, we're going to end up repeating what's happened because that's what we've been exposed to. A lot of people, if they see violence at home, if they see abuse at home, if they see marriage problems at home, then that's the reference point they carry and can end up maybe not in the same way, but end up repeating the same pattern. So it really does come down to identifying what are the events in your life that are significant. We call them significant emotional events. Becoming aware of them identifying the meaning you hold about them, and deciding. Now, one of the big problems that people have, I can comment on that in a later question, but I want to just flag it here, is the obligation that people feel when it comes to families, but the guilt that people can feel by not being like their family, like their parents, like their uncles and aunties, like not conforming to both the said and unsaid rules on how to live and behave.
I want to get to that in just a moment. First, I want to ask one quick question before that, and that's I think a lot of people believe that family trauma or some event that has happened in their past is just something they have to live with or accept. It happened, and now I just have to move on and either just leave it, forget it. And yet, as you say, it's going to manifest. It's just going to continue to repeat in relationships, in personal life, your personal growth, through business, in any number of ways. It's going to come up, maybe in different forms. What can you say to listeners who may have that belief that, well, something happened in the past, but it happened and now I just need to move past. I just need to live with it, just accept it and move on.
You can live with it. The question is it serving you? Does it match your idea of how life should be? So when a person says it's happened, I just have to live with it, it presupposes that I have to, if it assumes that I have to experience the effects of that for the rest of my life, then there is a problem. How do we switch it from there to saying, what is there to learn from this? And a lot of people do that. A lot of people will say, well, I don't want things to turn out that way. And again, you have to look at your memories and do you feel emotion of these things? What meanings? It always comes down to that. What is the meaning? See, the worst day of your life could be the best day of your life if you chose to give it a new empowering meaning. That's what a lot of people who have succeeded in one way or another have done. They're never without adversities. In fact, people who succeed, they generally are the ones with the most adversities. They only succeeded because they gave it a new meaning. They used it to fuel their growth. Let's take that over to family trauma. Is there something that has happened that if you're running around the planet saying that I got the wrong end of the stick or poor me or, you know, I can't do anything now because that's what I got, that's what I saw, that's what I heard, that's what I felt, well, then you're giving away your power. You're giving away your power. Bit by bit, people, as it is, people give away their personal power to like a million people. The boss, the, the ex-spouse, the parent, the neighbor, right? People can have the tendency to pointing the finger out, or realizing three fingers are pointing back, and it's a pattern. And it's no different to family trauma. There is a point that you can wake up and say, if it's meant to be, it's up to me. I don't need to be at the effect of that. That doesn't describe who I am. That doesn't define my future. This kind of self-talk would be very, very empowering for people. And along the way, here's the thing: there's barely anybody who really, really grew, really changed, uh, who didn't lose some people along the way. And I think that's the harder pill to swallow for people. We cannot just keep every single person forever. And it doesn't mean you have to push them away either. You just grow to the point where, and you got to, this is the big one, Jim, being okay with losing some people along the way. This is the hard way. I had to learn it the hard way. This will happen. And if it's not happening enough, or if it's not happening at all, you got to look at your life situation. Have you really changed and grown?
That's goes along with some of what you said earlier in that if you've experienced some kind of family trauma or it doesn't even have to be a family trauma, but there's a guilt factor of breaking away from your family or being a different person than maybe they want you to be or expect you to be. if someone is on a path of personal growth and they're meeting resistance from their family, what are some ways that they can maybe set up some healthy boundaries so that they can continue doing what they need to do, and maybe they do lose people along the way, or maybe they can create a healthier relationship with the people they care about?
Yes, I often talk about this idea. I think it's in podcast episode 3 in a bit more detail, but I'm going to raise that again here. Is we train people how to treat us. It's not rocket science. If you allow people to say, do certain things to you, around you, with you, and you allow it, it means you are not objecting to it. In fact, in many cases, you are part of it. Then first we need to acknowledge that, right? Very important line. We train people how to treat us. We're always training them. Then we have to look at, is the relationship important to us? It could be a family, it could be non-family. Is the relationship important to you? And many times that can be the case. If that's the case, means you don't want a situation where this person is completely cut out, then you need to start a different process. Let's call it untraining. And it's a gradual process. You see, because if you've allowed something, if you've been okay with something for 10 years, and now you're on this personal growth path, and you come out and go, stop, don't do that. You could literally just shock and confuse that person. You could damage the relationship irreparably, and you could remain in negative emotions about it. So you have to look after yourself here as well. The relationship is important to you. Start the process of untraining. It's generally like 2, 3 steps. Number one, not directly, but through your responses and your actions, show show the other person that you're less interested. You're not taking part in it. People pick up on the clues. You don't have to be direct. So the process includes gradually, and it has to be gradual, depending on the tenure of the relationship till now. I know I've done this many times. It works. And then when you start the untrain, there is a point at which you flip the coin and now you retrain. But you must have led up to that point. Like, I'll give you an example. There was someone we knew who would all the time talk about people, talk behind their back, judge people. And whenever we were around them, that's my wife and I, we always saw instances of it. And there was a point where it just was so not aligned, just didn't seem right. That be that idea, because you know what they say, if they're talking about everyone else behind their back, they're talking about you,
Yeah.
right? But in any case, I'm not a very big fan of that behavior. I think when a person talks negatively about another person, they're essentially telling you who they are. It's a projection, right? And so I thought to myself, I said, well, we've been around these people for a very long time. And the relationship is important to us because it's one way or another connected in the family. What would happen if we just suddenly said, hey, I have a boundary, this is the boundary, I'm going to enforce it, you don't do that? You can make it a very, very problematic situation. So what we started to do was initially we would at least be in that area where they were communicating and talking about these things. We would just casually show lack of interest, not participate in it in any way, not even laugh, or maybe look busy, go out and get a drink, get a glass of water. I would did that consistently over a period of time. If the conversations were happening in a chat forum, no response. Now you're not saying stop it, but you're also, right, not encouraging it. And then it took a period of time, and then suddenly we were able to state our opinion. Oh, look, I don't really want to spend a lot of time. It just brings me negative feelings. So and walked away. And over a period of time, we noticed then they stopped completely speaking about other people in front of us. You see what I did there? That's untraining and retraining. Now there is some level of understanding that perhaps there is some disagreement or misalignment, but it's not strong enough to damage that relationship. We can meet and we can hang out. So I think there is something to be said about that. A lot of people have never had boundaries in their life. Forget about enforcing them. The amount of people that I hear from, the amount of my students have told me, I didn't even know there's such a thing called enforcing boundaries. That presupposes you don't have boundaries. That also presupposes that you've never learned how to respect other people's boundaries. It's just not being taught. Because, why people don't teach you how to enforce boundaries? Because they unconsciously want to breach your boundaries. They don't want you to have boundaries. They may not be conscious of it, right? So how can they have their own if they don't have? Because and I think I've seen that a lot. I've seen that a lot, and that's a very important point. That people, now once you get the relationship to that level, you don't always have to enforce boundaries by saying them directly. It all depends on the nature of the relationship. You can show it with your behavior. Does that make sense? That's very powerful.
I
No one's
imagine,
talking about this.
I imagine that would be a more powerful way to do it is to live the boundary rather than say the boundary.
I love it. Live the boundary. By the way, there are some situations where the boundary has to be communicated clearly, fast, and then consequences need to be enforced. You see, once you have a boundary and that boundary is breached and you do nothing about it, it's going to be breached in a bigger way. So you need to have it, you need to, and I think that applies. And the tricky part, we're talking about family here today. The tricky part is how to do it within family. And the example I've given you is very close to a family situation. So I think in family, the untraining, retraining method is better. Number two is, and this is where understanding why people do what they do, understanding their model of the world is so important, and communication. See, all problems are communication problems. Do you care enough to know what is important to the other person in the family? Because you can use it in so many ways to meet them where they are. See, you should be taking people from where they are, not from where they're not. So if you go first, you find out what's important to them and you deliver to them, it's a lot easier. Law of reciprocation. That's another way to do it in family. And the other thing with families is communication is key. And how if you suddenly now have boundaries and you didn't have them before, it's about explaining the reasons. With family, always explain them the reason why. Hey, this is what's happening. This is why I'm doing it. This is why it's important to me. And and then go first again. I want to respect your boundaries. This is where I'm at. It's nothing personal. It's going to allow me. And I think that communication piece is very, very important. Even though there's no guarantee that it'll work immediately. People may be like, no, you're going to be this way because you've always been this way. And I mean, family. This is the thing, Jim. Family comes with expectations. It's full of expectations. I always say love can be unconditional, but not relationships.
There may be people who are listening who have experienced some either a family related trauma or generational patterns that they might be aware of. They might not exactly be aware of how they're repeating them. People who know you and who have worked with you, they know that NLP is central to the work that you do. Are there NLP techniques that can specifically help someone who wants to identify and or break these generational patterns? Is there something that they can do to get started, maybe?
Well, the term generational patterns in itself presupposes or assumes that things are getting passed down to you through generations. Now, there's a lot of truth in that. If you look at facial characteristics can pass down, body characteristics can pass down. Some people say illnesses can be passed down. That's a whole different topic because I don't entirely believe that. Um, Things that are important, cultural things, traditions can be passed down. And I think that lends itself to the idea that fears and beliefs and patterns, internal patterns can be passed down. I mean, we know that if you think of, studies have shown that a baby can feel emotion when it's in the womb, right? And I'm sure there'll be a lot more study and research done on what happens to the baby's life eventually if a mother does certain things internally and externally during pregnancy. I think the findings would be very, very interesting. I personally think what the mother is thinking and feeling could impact the baby's life outcomes. Experiencing, for example, a lot of negative emotions during the pregnancy could certainly have an impact. Arguably, I'm not basing this on any particular study, on how much fear the baby feels on a regular basis. Right? There have to be some data supporting that. How is it that some babies they come into the world and they're so confident, some are consistently fearful? I'd have to argue that something is happening in the brain. But anyway, let's go back to generational. I mean, they could, arguably certain things get passed down generationally. But here's my point. We've seen that through neurolinguistics, our work. We've seen that, through our neurohacking methods. No matter who you are, no matter where you are, no matter what you brought with you, no matter what pre-exists, if you can use that term, there is a way to reset everything entirely. You see, Morris Massey said, who you are is where you were as a child. Sure, I can agree with that to a degree. But what if I told you that you can reset your internal programs? In fact, there's specific 19 programs that are very relevant. You can completely reset them. Reset means you can bring in the other side. Two, you can completely change your values. You see, values are stored kinesthetically in a hierarchy in our nervous system. You can neurologically change the meaning of events in your nervous system so that you can visit any event from the past and not feel negative emotions. And if you can do all of that, you're a different being, no matter the generational patterns. So in terms of what people can do, well, first thing is intention. First thing is, what is the limiting, we have this idea called limiting decisions. We talk about it in the Energy Secret book, and people want to know what that is and what to do about it. You see, when negative events happen in our life, very often we make a conscious or unconscious decision. Here's the good news. You can actually reverse the decision. So if you feel that you are where you are who you are limited because as a result of generational passed down, then first you ought to look at that belief itself. Do you want to be at the effect of that? Do you want to continue believing that? It's like, people say, is past life real? Well, there's not enough evidence that it's real. There's also not enough evidence that it's not true. So, what do you want to believe? Because if that's your starting point, now you can identify the events in your life that have contributed to your present situation in life. You can start to reevaluate, list out all the significant emotional events, write down what meaning it has for you, then write down what is its connection, the event's connection. Now we have this incredible breakthrough process that we teach in our mastery courses. It literally shifts people 360 degrees. They're able to produce new behaviors, new outcomes, and that's irrespective of generational patterns of family trauma. Gotta have the intention, gotta want it, gotta not be scared of becoming somebody different, because you will. But not like you'll be the same person at the core, but you'll have different things that are important to you, different behaviors, different outcomes. That's the most exciting thing. Jim, people say you have one life. I disagree. You have one body, you have one vehicle. I couldn't say hi. I don't know what to say to the Reg from 15 years ago. I don't think we could have a conversation. Same body. What was important to me then is completely different now. What I valued then is completely different now. What lights me up is completely different now than what it did. So how is it the same person? in the same vehicle, in the same vessel. I think that's my message to the listeners. Rather than going too deep into what is a generational pattern, what is family trauma, and what to do about it, I think the bigger message is what can you do in spite of?
If someone is, you've spoken on this before, and so I want to touch on it in the episode today, is this idea that looking at a relationship, personal relationship, and you've said before that often people will get into an intimate relationship and they're looking for a type of love to be reciprocated that they did not get from a parent, one or the other of the parents. And furthermore, that it is impossible to get it from within the intimate relationship. And so I can see these patterns again, repeating.
Yeah.
What do you tell someone who's in that moment where they continually get into relationships and they're searching for something, or maybe they're trying to make their partner into something to resolve something that happened long ago?
It's a lost cause. You're right.
I've thrown a hard one at you here.
So yeah, I think that's not uncommon, and it's in a way it's so human. We go into relationships, and relationship is somewhere where our deepest fears come up on a regular basis. Relationship is where we get seen and heard the most, and so we have a lot of expectations. And part of that, this may not be conscious for a lot of people. This may be just happening at the unconscious level, that we go into a relationship and we expect to get all the missing pieces that we didn't get. We expect to fill up the void. To some extent, it's cute. Like I can see, I'm sure I've done it too at some point. But I think it goes back to the principles. I think people have to want to go into a relationship, not to get only. This is the biggest issue. I think it's hard for people to even comprehend this. If you're only going to get, that is famous line in Jerry Maguire. I mean, I'm just not a big fan of that. You complete me. I complete me, you complete you, right? It presupposes that wholeness is not possible. Your partner is a very important part of the equation because they're a mirror. You're going to see things in them that I knew. You may not recognize it initially. It could be one of the most powerful personal growth or spiritual growth platforms. And number one, you go into, if you have the intention, I'm gonna listen. I'm gonna go in there to give. I'm gonna go in there to get as well. But more importantly, I'm gonna go there to become. Like, at what point do we recognize this? Do we start to move in this direction? What point do we say relationship? And by the way, the people are spend more time trying to have a relationship with who but someone used to be. Even in a relationship, I know with my own marriage, like I'm 21 years now married, and I'm telling you, the marriage I have with the person now is a completely different person who I met. But if I try to continually have a relationship with who she was, then I'm stopping her evolution. I must train myself to fall, and she must, and that's the discussion we have in our household, to enjoy and fall in love with and be happy with who they are now. I want to have a relationship with who that person is now. It's very similar to what happened with children. People continually trying to have a relationship with who they used to be. Go ask any child, and they will tell you, I want to be treated for who I am today, the age that I am today. Like, I get it. It's very cute. Oh, little Johnny, you're my little boy. No, but they may not say it, but they want to be heard in the way they are now. That's across all relationships. You want to recognize, you want to allow, and I think we somehow, in families in particular, I've found trends where people want, say, a family member to continue to remain who they were. In fact, they will tease them about it. They will use nicknames. Every time that's done, you're reminding that person that they had problems, for example, but you're not allowing for the fact that person has changed by continually reminding them and reminiscing and, oh, this stuff happens in families. It all sounds very cute, but go have a look at the statistics on what happens on Christmas Day. That's telling you the real truth. And it's very traumatic for people. People have a lot of trauma for what happened inside of their own families, and there is no recognition of it. And people stay in resentment for long periods of time. And so the best thing a person can do is reset their old selves, like you said, understand and create healthy boundaries, start the process of untraining, and be ready to have some people automatically leave. Because as you grow, you'll always attract certain types of people and you repel some others. And I know these things are easier said than done. Sure. But what do you want? Right? That's the question.
I imagine people will feel as though they have moved past an event. They have moved past a trauma, only for it to resurface again and maybe take them by surprise down the road sometime. Are there techniques that people can use to, I wouldn't say as a protection, but as to remain aware that this is a process. This is a lifelong process, and if something were to recur, what do they do then if they feel like they've already, or maybe they should have moved past it?
Yeah, a lot of times people think they move past it. And I'm going to get a little bit technical here. We have the conscious mind, which is a thinking mind, the mind that gives us willpower, logic, evaluation, judgments. Sure. At that level, we can consciously say, I'm not going to let that event affect me. I'm done with it. I don't want, I know this event. I'm not going to let it hold me back. I forgive. And sometimes that can work. Depends on the person's own groundedness, how well balanced they are in their life. For most people, these events are recorded and snapshots are taken. It's like kind of what I go into my book, The Energy Cube Secret. Significant emotional events. We say the content is repressed, but it's not gone. Means it is still there at the subconscious level. Now, the great news is that can be undone real fast. We have techniques in our field that can go to the point of the event, not even go inside the event, because that can be traumatic for a lot of people. There are dissociated techniques. You can actually undo the meaning of that event, how it's held in the nervous system. It's so powerful, so exciting what I just said, right? So if it resurfaces, that's telling you that it's at the subconscious level. That's why it's resurfacing. I have a lot of people that saying, Reg, I'm sure I've dealt with it. It's resolved. I say, but you're boiling your eyes right now. And you're telling me you've resolved it. No, you've said you don't want to deal with it. It's the same thing people say, I'm not going there. Right? Research after research has shown that, and there's a study done with about 60,000 cancer patients, and that was with CT scans that showed that in majority of the cases, uh, in the 3 years preceding the onset of the cancer symptoms, there had been a major significant emotional event. 60,000 patients. So we can consciously ignore, we can, and it's a very good thing to try to do is to try and make a meaning, resolve it, reach organic or spiritual resolution. But for a lot of people, that stuff is buried deep down. And I wish I could give a fast technique to do it, but the reality is that you need to step into an environment where it's and do it properly with the technique. Unfortunately, for a lot of people, therapy doesn't work either. Therapy can work, but going over an event over and over, talking about it for years and years and years, strengthens the neurology, strengthens the boundary of that event and the way it's held. So we believe in dissociated techniques using neurolinguistics and timeline. We use timeline. It's a very powerful visualization techniques that people can imagine their whole life, the past and the future in the form of a timeline, and they're able to go above and before events, not go inside the event, and do specific techniques to change the meaning. Now, in a simple way, what a person could do if they're wanting to travel, be careful of this, but if you're able to imagine an event, but make sure you don't imagine it with you in it. Means you don't step into your body and look through your own eyes. You look, make sure you see your body in the picture from above, in your mind, through your mind's eye, and keep distancing yourself from that visual until you feel no emotion, and then decide a new meaning. Get some learnings from it and bring back and then test it. There are some things that people can do. Ideally, they should be done under supervision. Depends on if there's trauma or not. But there's a little thing that people. can you imagine events? And you could try with a small event, like imagine something that happened, say, a day before at work or whatever. And can you bring that image to mind and then dissociate means view it in your mind from a distance. Notice what's happening. Make sure you see, if you're in the event, you see your body in the picture, and then keep distancing above or behind, whatever, until you don't feel an emotion as you think of the event. If you can do this, you have some great possibilities for you. Now, one more technique I want to share is it's called VK synesthesia. I'd like people, if there is any small event, try that. If they're feeling a bit irritated, frustrated, angry about something, they could bring that event to mind and then imagine looking at themselves from behind themselves, like I'm doing right now. I'm actually seeing this scene right now, and I'm seeing it from behind me. Must see the body in the picture. I get an incredible feeling and keep moving away. And how that situation. So if I was nervous about this, for example, the moment I do that, I'm no longer in. There's some really powerful technique, powerful things
Yeah.
you can do with your mind.
Can you share a story
I
of?
can see you did that.
I did. You saw me kind of. It makes you come down a little bit. Yeah,
It
it's a
does.
really
It changes your state
powerful
instantly.
technique.
Yeah, I have lots of different things, little that people can enact straight away. So,
Can you tell the listeners maybe about give an example of someone who you've worked with in this area of family trauma, generational patterns, who's been able to achieve some of the results that they're looking for, and maybe how it has impacted maybe their life, relationships, their business um, moving forward.
yeah, I think I would have worked with a lot of people who've had family-related trauma, generational patterns, and so forth. And I think when people, in a specific example comes to mind, where this one student who was feeling quite suicidal. Also, had a lot of people who've left cults and things. And a common theme is that there is suicidal tendencies. But what is suicide presuppose? What's underneath that? Means there is a disdain for one's existence. There is a lack of acceptance of understanding that, or at some level, there is this thought pattern that if this happened to me, that means I'm not meant to be here. I'm not meant to exist. Why? And I think I congratulate these people who came and did our programs and learned these things in spite of that, because they were able to reset the meaning of these events, take new meanings, and change their emotional responses, develop new and healthy boundaries, and even to an extent disconnect with certain people in life. Because you got to, at some point, you got to decide. You got to, it's interesting how many people I've asked when I ask this question on a scale of 0 to 10, how much you want to live. If I see a pause, if I see a doubtful answer, in one case I was told my mind says one thing, my heart says one thing. You see, your nervous system is always eavesdropping on your internal dialogue. You cannot continually have this question or this thought that why do I exist? Should I exist? I'm not, I shouldn't live anymore. And a lot of these things get inserted due to family trauma, right? I know people personally, including myself, that have had suggestions made to me that I should have never been born. So these things people can live with, and sometimes the people who are saying it, they don't even know what they're doing. Do you know research has shown if someone has done anything wrong by you, in most cases, they're not even aware. They don't even get it. So you're like someone did something to you 20 years ago, said something to you, and you're holding it, you're carrying it. 99% of the cases, when you go back and ask them, they don't, their neurology doesn't allow them to make the connection. But you're carrying it. It's that old, similar to that definition, revenge is, what is revenge? Is giving someone drinking poison and hoping the other person would die. It's the same thing. What is living family trauma in the now? It's, drinking poison and hoping the other people will understand what poison can do to their body.
Yeah,
How can they? You're the one who's drinking it.
You've mentioned when you were talking about personal relationships is going in with the expectation of getting something, and how that can be very detrimental. And I wonder if the same lens can be turned on families, that you're hoping to get something, an understanding, an apology, maybe, and some kind of closure in a moment. Is that part of it? And there's also, well, let's start with that. Is it trying to end the story well with your own family?
I think with family, here's the thing about family, whether we like it or not, we are connected to people in the family, both physically and metaphysically, both consciously and unconsciously. I think it's more about acceptance that that is the case. Number two, making some decisions. If certain people or certain ideas in your family are in the way of your ideal vision of who you are, you got to make some tough decisions. If you can be who you want to be, if you can move in the direction of where you want to go, then how can you like you? And if you can like you, how can you appreciate you? How can you respect you? Where is the idea of self love and self respect? It's gone, right? So some decisions need to be made. It's not about ending it well, it's about getting clear on who you want to become and what would happen if you didn't. Here are the four questions to ask. What would happen if you did? What would happen if you didn't? What wouldn't happen if you did? And what wouldn't happen if you didn't? I think running problems through these four quadrants, which really is similar to what happens in calculus. In calculus, for something to be true, it's got to be proven in four different quadrants. It's a very simple linguistic technique that we teach people, right? It's called converse inverse theorem and non-mirror image reverse.
Do you ever have people who worry that if they do, let's say, forgive a past event, or release it, that's almost a weakness, almost that they let someone get away with something, and so they have to carry it because otherwise the other person, I don't know, wins in some way?
Yeah, I love that question. That does happen. In fact, I've had to have these conversations with people in the past where someone, again, which we spoke about secondary gain. I don't know if this episode or the last one. The benefit of holding on to a problem can seem to be greater than the benefit of letting it go. So people may unconsciously hold on to it. I've known people who held on to anger saying, "Oh, I'm not letting go of anger. That means I've forgiven them." That's not the point. What's anger doing to you? You know, we're not saying you're letting the perpetrator off the hook. There is things that can be done, right? You can still continue on the path of what you need to do, but holding it on, you're right. People hold on and they think that they're getting revenge by holding on to that negative emotion. That's the worst way to approach it. Worst way to approach it, right? And because they don't know what it's like once they've let go of the anger, they can be more rational, more logical, more strategic in how they approach the situation. And anger can lead to major issues in the body. Sadness, continuing ongoing sadness from the past, can lead to a complete drop in the immune system. These things have major implications. Now, I'm not saying don't feel emotions. We must feel emotions. It's a very good thing to feel emotions. But carrying the gestalts from the past is the fastest way to compromise your health. Dis-ease is unease with certain things, situations. It has to manifest in the body at some point.
On the flip side, and I kind of want to close our conversation with this because I think it gives people some hope. When people are able to break these generational patterns, and you've worked with so many people who have been able to do this and then step into a new life, essentially, what does that mean for the person and also for their relationships and maybe down the line for their future, for their children and so forth?
What does it mean for them? Well, it means a lot of good things for them because I think the ability to love and respect self goes exponentially higher. Um, the people are ultimately looking for meaning from their lives, right? The meaning improves. Their own relationships will improve because they're not carrying what they don't need to carry. And more importantly, like you said, I think the projection onto their own children, the people they bring in the world, they raise in the world, it's a very, very different phenomenon. I know everything that I've discussed with you is what I've gone through. Everything. And so I know how important it is to bring that energy into it. Your children will model you. If you sacrifice yourself, your children are going to do that. Children don't do what you tell them to do, they do what you do. They always see, hear, and feel what you're doing, and they carry these images the rest of their life. You see, your parents' voice when you're a child becomes your inner voice when you're an adult. So it has major implications. There's ideas like breaking the chains. You only need one person to break the chain. So that's the great news here.
If someone is interested in they're listening today, they want to break the chain, they want to dive deeper into the healing process that you've described, how can they connect with you or learn more through Neuromasters Academy?
I think continue to listen to this podcast. It's a great place to go. Read the Energy Cube secret book. Go visit the website, neuromastersacademy.com. And a lot of people, I think they can book a call and have a conversation with one of our team and their specific situation and what the path looks like. At least in these calls, you'll get some major insights and breakthroughs. You walk away knowing what possibilities lie for you. So I think intention has to be there and must take that first step always. Because if nothing changes, right? And we want to take responsibility, personal responsibility for our outcomes. We need to take our personal power away rather than blaming other people, rather than always saying it's because of this. We need to come back to if it's meant to be, it's up to me. That's my main message.
Reg, I want to thank you again for joining us for the episode. And to our listeners, family patterns and trauma, they may shape us, but they don't have to define our future. And as Reg has shown, the journey to healing is possible, and it's transformative for ourselves and the generations that come after us. So I encourage you to take the first step today and to remember that you do have the power to rewrite your story.
For anyone listening to this episode, I want to give them a free masterclass that's going to really help them understand this topic even better. All they need to do is go to Reg Malhotra Official on Instagram and DM the word Heal24, and one of our team will make sure they get this. Normally this class has been, only been available to some of our top level students. But what we'll do is we'll make this available so they can get more information, better ideas. And, this may also include a demonstration of how we've helped somebody let go of an old pattern. So they need to go to Reg Malhotra Official on Instagram or Neuromasters Academy in Instagram, either of them, and DM the word Heal24, and one of our team will get something over to them.
Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on the Neuromasters podcast. Bye for now.
Thanks, Jim. Thank you for listening to the Neuromasters show. I'm Reg Malhotra, reminding you that your trauma is seen, your transformation is possible, and your breakthrough is right around the corner. If you found today's episode valuable, you can visit our website for many more resources, to register for a live breakthrough experience, and to continue your journey of reclaiming your full self.